is Irish witchcraft and why does authenticity matter? So, real quick, I am Lora O'Brien. I have been an Irish witch for 30 plus years here in Ireland, never lived anywhere else. And I have all of that experience plus about 20 years dedicated as a Morrigan priest. And I have also been a professional heritage manager of our Irish heritage sites. I'm a scholar, I have a master's in Irish history, and a practitioner through all of that. So I've really blended the learning, the experience, and the integration, which is the three pillars model of Irish pagan practice that we teach at the Irish Pagan School. So Irish witchcraft is spiritual and magical practices really rooted in Ireland's culture, our landscape, our language, and our living traditions that are still part of our society and culture here on the island. It's not aesthetic based, it's not a TikTok trend, it's relational. So it's about relationship with land, ancestors, lore, place, and also the other world, because that's where the magic comes from. And the authenticity matters because this is a living culture. So while somebody like me can use my decades worth of learning and practical experience and lived experience here to create something that is new and fresh and contemporary, that's always going to be very firmly rooted within the ancient traditions here on the island. So it's this living culture. It's not a fantasy. And when it's misused, when it's, when it goes into the Celtic cash cow machine and gets taken up by non-native practitioners, authors, all the rest of it, there is so much missing from it, so much context, so much understanding, so much innate connection and relationship that has been built up through a lifetime. All of that is missing. So it's not that people can't practice. Anybody can practice. That's literally my life's work, is to provide authentic connection to Ireland, Irish spirituality, Irish magic, all of that. Anybody can practice it as long as you're approaching it respectfully. But unfortunately, the issue comes when people teach it. People who are not native to this, have not got the context, have not got the experience, have not got that innate relationship that has been built up for a lifetime or even generations, because it's passed down through DNA and all of that as well. So unfortunately, when people who don't have that, who are missing that, start to teach it, it can really lead to cultural harm because things get diluted, they get washed out. It's like a photocopy after a photocopy after a photocopy after a photocopy. Eventually things really degrade, and the further you remove all of this from source, the more of a shambles it's going to be. So we really try and stick to our source culture, our native culture. And this doesn't just apply to Ireland, of course. We need to really decolonize all of our thinking about New Age practices and spirituality and really look to source for all of the native cultures and listen to those people and platform those people and make sure that they are the leading voices. And from there, then, as long as those traditions and cultures are open to it, people can approach as long as they're respectful, as long as they don't feel entitled, which is one of the biggest issues with colonial mentality. I wasn't supposed to get into all this in this video, but here we are again. Anyway, you can build a deep, respectful practice, even if you have no bloodlines or DNA connection to Ireland. You absolutely can, if you're going to take that right approach, if you're going to approach it looking for right relationship, looking for balanced connection, looking for a balanced flow of give and take, rather than just that entitled take, 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 that is the colonizer mentality. So please do. That's literally why I'm creating these videos. That's why I started the Irish Pagan School. That's why I started the Om Academy. That's why I started the Morrigan Academy. There's links to all of that below. That's why I create thousands thousands of pieces of free content besides all the paid classes that we do at the Irish Pagan School and the academies. There is so much free resources and content because it is my mission to connect you to authentic Irish magic and spirituality. Again, as long as you have the right approach when you come looking for it. So, Irish witchcraft versus Wicca versus paganism. We kind of have to start with what Wicca and paganism are to illustrate then how Irish witchcraft is different from there. So, Wicca was British origin, 1900s, 20th century, structured ritual, dual deities. Traditional Wicca, particularly, was very hierarchical, was very much about a god and a goddess, and was very gender conforming, particularly when it started. And the idea of this kind of very traditional British system, which really took a lot from, I mean, we're talking about decolonization. They were the original colonizers, right? Certainly here in Ireland, they were. And they have taken a lot from different cultures, different traditions around the world, and kind of mishmashed it in to create this system of Wicca. Now, I'm not against Wicca. I have a 3rd degree in Alexandrian witchcraft. It is where I learned a lot of my ritual skills and a lot of my group situational skills, and had a lot of my experience back in the early days when I was 18. I started. So I'm not against Wicca. It has turned then, I think, when it graduated to an American audience, it became very diluted again, very dissipated through eclectic Wicca in the United States. And all of it is just, it is what it is. Okay. It's going to be right for some people. It's not right for me. It's not what Irish witchcraft is or is about. Okay. And then paganism generally, I am a pagan. I use paganism as an umbrella term, but it includes many different paths: Norse, Greek, Irish, etc. So many different paths within paganism, so many different ways to be doing things. It really is about a belief or understanding that nature has its own force, has its own energy. Nature is sentient in some cases, with the Gaia theory, and the understanding that everything is in relationship to everything else. So paganism is very compatible with Irish witchcraft, but not all Irish witches are pagans. We have a lot of Christian witches and Catholic witches here in Ireland as well. Witchcraft is its own thing. So paganism is the spirituality, is not a religion. Traditional Wicca would be more towards the religion side of things. There is dogma in it. Paganism is a much more open, general spirituality, which is very linked to animism, which is really, according to psychological research that's been done, animism is pretty much the default for our humanity. Like if a group of kids are left on an island to grow up together, they will default to animism, which is an understanding of the sacredness and the energy and the connection in all things, right? So Irish witchcraft then is, as I said, its own thing. It's not a closed practice, but it is culturally rooted. And again, the further you get from source, the less it's Irish witchcraft and the more it becomes something completely different. Irish American witchcraft is a thing for sure. The same way people who grew up in Irish communities in America often would call themselves Irish, but they're not Irish as we would recognize them. And again, that's not a hierarchical thing. It's just the way things are. Irish is an ethnicity. It is part of our culture. So as far as I'm concerned, anybody who lives on this island or has lived on this island can be part of the Irish traditions and has that lived experience of being part of our culture, our society, our own heritage here. And if you've never lived on the island, what I would say is you don't call yourself Irish, but you can absolutely practice Irish witchcraft or Irish traditions, Irish magic, Irish spirituality. So it's not closed, but it's not completely open either, in that it's not a free for all. You really have to learn it from source. So if you can't be part of the culture here on the island, then you absolutely need to be learning and gaining your experience and your understanding from people who are, right? That's not just me, by the way. There are many, many people who have so much to teach. Now, I don't think there's anybody quite doing what I've been doing, and certainly not for as long as I've been doing it and as publicly as I've been doing it. However, there are people who are coming up behind me and are doing great jobs and are doing great work. So I would suggest you make sure that you are learning from native sources in this sense. And we really focus on relationship over ritual. So it's about very practical, daily building of relationship, whether that's between yourself and the land, yourself and deities, gods and goddesses of Ireland. Again, we've so many resources at the Irish Pagan School if you want to learn about the mythology, the stories of these gods and goddesses. Highly recommend going through our blog, going through this YouTube channel. Myself and my partner John have done an amazing amount of content. It's amazing even to me looking back. There's thousands and thousands of pieces over the years. That is just for free. You can go to irishpagan.school/free, and there's a year or two, if you're doing something every day, there's a year or two's worth of completely free content there. So make sure that you access the resources that we have made available. So again, we focus on relationship over ritual. It's not that we don't do ritual. Ritual is important, but it's not ritual in the way of like ceremonial magic, which is where a lot of Wiccan and other witchcraft tradition ritual would come from. This kind of medieval ceremonial magic, which would be the root or the basis, whether it's recognized or unrecognized. But as a historian, I can certainly recognize it for a lot of this. And a lot of that is very rooted in Christian frame of mind, Christian ideology, Christian understanding, Christian dichotomies. So that's really not part of our traditional witchcraft here in Ireland. And it's not that Christianity hasn't come into our witchcraft, because it absolutely has. We'll talk about that in a little while. But the relationships that we are building and the rituals that we are performing are often not initiatory. They're not part of this hierarchy. They're not part of a big system or a big plan. They're really solitary, experiential rituals, which draw from Irish folklore, Irish mythology, Irish history. So there aren't these kind of ceremonial templates. And many people here blend things unknowingly. There's a lot that has come into neo-paganism, which it's very difficult now to find where the source is. Excuse me, I'm just getting over it. Bless me so the fairies don't take me. So blending things unknowingly is not inherently wrong, as long as you're very aware of your sources and you're doing it conscientiously. But again, the further you get from source into some kind of mishmashed, blended nonsense that's available, usually online, in a lot of books. There's a lot of AI content being generated currently in both books and blogs that is really just pure nonsense. So be really careful about your sources. We have some videos here on the Irish Pagan School YouTube channel and podcast, which really help people understand how to avoid bad source material with regard to Celtic or Irish paganism or Irish witchcraft. So real Irish witchcraft is built on our own cultural backbone. And we're looking at our folklore. So we have sources like Duchas, Duchas. And Duchas, the word Duchas means heritage, but it also means like native place, native connection as well. So it's a very important word in our culture, and it is the name for the National Folklore Collection as well here in Ireland. So that's available online, duchas.ie. You'll find an amazing repository of Irish folklore, which has been digitized. And through that, we get local tales, seasonal customs. A lot of the folklore that has survived is, again, part of living traditions that really at least have their roots in very ancient pagan practices. Now, we also build our practices, our witchcraft, on language. The Irish language, or Gaeilge, holds power. Focal Neartha, words of power, spoken charms, right back through the mythology, the Marian and her sisters using voice and noise to create change in accordance with their will. This is all really, really important part, again, the backbone of our Irish witchcraft. And then also very connected to our sacred landscape. Our rivers, our wells, our stones, and the she places. And she, in this sense, means both the otherworldly entities that live in the other world and visit us here, but also then the actual sites where access to the other world is closer, is more possible, is very prevalent. And there are places like that all over the island, hundreds, thousands of them. So again, the backbone of Irish witchcraft is about respect. It's about doing the work. We are servants in our community. We are of service. The Banfassa, the wise woman in the Irish traditions, was very much a local healer, a protector of the oppressed, somebody who lived outside of the oppressive systems of society. And when we're doing the work, we don't cherry pick myths or folklore or history just to suit aesthetics or, again, TikTok trends or anything like that. We engage with the primary sources and the living tradition. And that is really, really important. Again, this is not just me telling you what I think. This is decades, a lifetime, I mean, almost 5 decades at this point of this relationship I have with the land, with the culture, with the people, with the other world, with the language, with the folklore, the stories that I grew up with. And that's just the lived experience. Then there's all the active learning I've done as a Master of Irish History, as an Irish Heritage Site Manager. All of that, those primary sources have given me access to this living tradition, have made sure that I have the ability to see what is part of more ancient practices that still remain within our living tradition. And we don't modernize things as such. As I said, I will definitely work to bring things into contemporary relevance, definitely. But and old does not mean irrelevant, of course it doesn't. But also, we don't look at old sources or old sites or old academic translations or supposed insights. We don't look on those with rose-tinted glasses either. Part of the work of the Irish witch is to figure shit out, is to look at what the experts have been saying through the centuries and understand the lens, that the colonial lens that a lot of that was being put through, because that was the only academia that we had available to us, was through the Protestant ascendancy. So some of that is very twisted and skewed, certainly. And then before that, our oral traditions were being captured by medieval monks. So again, we don't have anything that hasn't been viewed through a Christian lens or recorded with that inherent Christian or male or Protestant bias that is in there, right? Or Catholic bias as well, because, none of that Christianity did much good certainly for Irish witches here on the island. So choosing your own path is really important. There's no one way, and certainly not my way. What I'm telling you is the reality of our culture, of our traditions. But I don't speak for every Irish witch. There are plenty of Wiccans here on the island, both traditional and eclectic. There are plenty of people who have no problem with English Celtic shamanism and all of that nonsense. That's okay. That's their prerogative. I know I just called it nonsense, but like everybody gets to choose their own path, right? But what I'm saying is Irish witchcraft is very diverse, and no two Irish witches are going to be practicing the same or doing the same things or focusing on the same things, because we're part of, again, those roles and functions within society that were of service to community, of service to society, of service as a bridge between the other world and this world. And all of that is very important part of the tradition, but it doesn't look the same when you look at it, being practiced by different people in different counties and different regions of this island, right? We also have to take into consideration that a lot of Irish witchcraft, especially in our folklore, was being preserved as part of what we'd call crypto-paganism. So quietly practicing with outward labels, especially in Catholic Ireland and Protestant as well, I suppose. But it was very prevalent in Catholicism, where a Banfassa would absolutely proclaim to be Catholic. And who knows whether her own spirituality was Catholic or not. Catholicism is a beautiful spirituality in itself. I have no problem with Catholic spirituality. But unfortunately, it does not allow, when you get into the Catholic Church and the organization and all of that repressive, patriarchal, misogynistic structures and the toxicity that unfortunately has been brought to the island by the Catholic Church as an organization, as a cult here on the island. So crypto-paganism is very much a part of our living tradition, where people are nominally Catholic, but actually what we're doing in practice is, whether we call it paganism or witchcraft or not, is we are lighting candles. So using natural forces such as fire to make a little ritual to create change in accordance with our will. The absolute classic one that I always use to illustrate this point is your granny or your mammy or your auntie or your neighbor lighting a candle when you're doing your leaving cert, your final exams in school or college exams, so that you will have a good outcome. That's literally the definition of witchcraft, using natural forces, ritual to create change in accordance with will. So many of our community members would also go for a cure. If the doctors weren't available, or if the doctors weren't doing what they needed to do to heal a person within your family, you would bring that person to somebody in Ireland who has a cure for something, or who has the sight, who can see clearly, who can use divination, who can use prophecy, who can speak truth, and will be able to tell you exactly what's going on or what's going wrong. Don't get in the comments asking me for a cure for this or a cure for that. This is all done by word of mouth, right? Again, it's a living tradition. And people who have the cure, who have the sight, don't tend to advertise in that way. And again, crypto-paganism, whether they would call themselves pagans, whether they would call themselves witches, healers, Banfassa, any of that, I don't know. In their outward voice or in their own hearts, I don't know. But what they're doing is what I would describe as crypto-paganism. Now, part of Irish witchcraft as well, one of the options, I suppose, is hearth magic or hearth witchcraft. And this is really magical home-based practice. So we're talking healing, foods, herbalism, seasonal magic, all of that. Now, hearth witchcraft is, again, very strong in the Irish tradition. We have a whole class on hearth magic at the Irish Pagan School. We have another class on divination by fire, which is, again, part of that. And this was all just a part of our living tradition as well, and still is. And then you have maybe more structured ritual magic, but it's still very much rooted in our lore, in our mythology, in our Rosk poetry, in Ogham, in sovereignty rites. So this would be where we start to get into maybe a priesthood role, which crosses over into spiritual or religious. Now, honestly, I'm a mix of all of that. Except crypto paganism, because I was very early. I think I was 7 when I told my parents that Catholicism wasn't working for me at all. And the biggest response I had from my mom was, well, you can tell your nana. So I had to go and face my grandmother, my nana, who I was very close to my whole life, actually, and tell her that Catholicism just wasn't working for me. So I can only imagine what she thought when a 7-year-old, a very precocious 7-year-old, showed up on her doorstep and had to have a very serious talk with her. So she, in fairness to her, she didn't try and talk me back into it, but she watched that situation. And when I published my first book in 2004, she was very proud of me for my Irish Witchcraft from an Irish Witch book, which is available in second edition now. You can find it online. And all of this to say that, I've done that. I have done a hearth witchcraft, although I do tend to call myself more a ditch witch than a hearth witch. My very good friend Tara Tyne has popularized that term, but it's one that's been rolling around here in Ireland for a long time. And the ritual magic side of things really came for me when I was taken up by the Morrigan, made to work for the Morrigan, about 2 decades ago. And I started practicing more about sovereignty, more about structure. But also when I started to teach, you kind of have to be a little bit more ritualistic when you're teaching or when you're working with other people, so that there is a structure that everybody can be on the same page. So all of those are perfectly fine. There's no one way that's going to be right. But what I want you to ask yourself is, what draws you in? So myth, nature, healing, justice, all of those are questions that you need to be sitting with and really finding where your own Irish witchcraft focus could be or should be. And you don't have to make a decision for the rest of your life. You can try a few things out, you can figure a few things out, but really start where you are. And always look to Irish source, always look to Irish context for meaning. And one of the things that we're very, very strong on at the Irish Pagan School is, again, it's not my way or John's way or any of our teachers that teach at the school. What we do is we provide the information, we provide the tools, we provide the guidance for you to find your own way. So we're not teaching one true way. We are trying to connect you to source, to the tools, to the experiences, to the learning that we've been able to access, so you don't have to go and repeat all the mistakes that we had to make. So that's kind of our mission. Authentic connection to Ireland, literally, is my mission in this world. So another thing I wanted to talk about was, you don't need tools or, fancy tools or anything to start practicing Irish witchcraft. I have a class at the Irish Pagan School that is the Wisdom of Trees. I'll link it below. And I have another class that's about Irish paganism, a living tradition. I'll link it below. I have another class that is about Triac, the foundations in Irish magic. And those are very core foundational pieces, if you like, to this realm, and whichever part of it you're interested in, I would definitely recommend. But I'm just thinking, I don't think there is one tool recommended in any of those. I could be wrong. I think maybe in the Dracht one I've talked about the symbolism of tools, or was that in the Morgan Intensive? I can't quite remember. So we do have tools that are part of the tradition, if you like, but the tools are not necessary to take part in the tradition, is the message I want to get across to you. But you can look to natural resources, really, and natural power sources. And that will make the heart and soul of any Irish witchcraft practice. So things like white quartz that is naturally collected, or even amethyst. We have an amethyst quarry here in County Mayo, where I have collected some pieces of natural amethyst. We often have white quartz on our beaches here. Now, I'm not recommending that you come to Ireland and take our stones away. Please don't. But any kind of a natural stone is the point I'm making, rather than a crystal that has been taken violently from, I was going to use the R word, but taken violently from the earth in some far off land by possibly child labor. That's not going to really do you a lot of good for your relationship to land, for your relationship to your own connection with spiritual places. So I would suggest that you take a walk in a place that has meaning to you. It doesn't have to be in Ireland. A natural place that provides safety or protection or clarity or spirituality to you, something that is meaningful and symbolic. One thing you could look for, which is very much a part of the Irish tradition, is the connection of earth and sea and sky. So sea can be water as well, but anything that is a convergence, any place that is a convergence of either two or three of those things. So that could be a beach, it could be the shore of a lake, it could be a cliff top, it could be a cave, it could be a riverbank, it could be a bog. Any of those places are, again, especially if you approach them with the intention of that connection between earth and sea and sky, they are liminal places. So they are kind of between places. And what I have found is anywhere in the world where you find a place like that, the other world can be contacted in an easier fashion at places like that. Then it's not that you can't do it in like a city center, you absolutely can. But especially when you're starting out, that's the kind of place I would look for as a natural power point, right? So again, if you have natural stones, plants like blackthorn, again, that native Irish trees class will give you a very good basis. And there's some small spells and rituals in it as well. Blackthorn, elder, hawthorn, these are all magically connected here in Ireland. Dandelion, comfrey, um, mugwort, any of these are part, honeysuckle, any of these are part of the Irish tradition. We have another class, again by Tara Tyne, the Ditch Witch, at the Irish Pagan School, which is an introduction to herb magic, if that's where you want to be taking your practice. I would definitely recommend taking Tara's class at the Irish Pagan School. I'm going to put a link. I hope I remember to link all these classes, but you can just go to irishpaganschool.com and there's a link above that says all courses, and you'll find everything that we have available there. You can sort it by category. There's a drop down for category. There's a drop down for author. You can sort it out that way. So I'll definitely put a link to that, but I will try and remember to put a link to these individual classes. So definitely check the description below. And then again, anything natural, you can use woodfall, you can use dirt or clay from a particular place. You can use rainwater or salt water from the sea. And you're also looking for weather and sky signs. So divination by clouds, wind, and birds is a very strong part of Irish magic, of Irish witchcraft, of the Druid tradition here in Ireland. Really anything that's going to be ethically sourced is going to do you right. And that includes not grabbing stones from sacred sites. We get about 8 or 9 million tourists here in Ireland every year. And a lot of people take stones from our archaeological monuments, which, as a former heritage manager, is one of my particular bugbears. So please don't damage anything, you know. If you're collecting something from a sacred site, collect something that has fallen, a stone or a leaf or something that's not part of the actual monument. Please, please, please. And whatever tools or sources of power that you're using, they are extensions of your own intent and your own land connection. They're not props. They're supposed to be part of your relationship. They either symbolize your relationship or facilitate that connection and relationship. So it's very important that you are, again, in right relationship with everything that you're using. The actual witchcraft, then, the daily practices or the weekly practices that actually work. So I have done a small series of specific Irish magic, protection, clearing, grounding, and just little spells that you can use. There's some on the blog. There is some here on the YouTube. At the end, I will stick a link to the playlist for particular Irish magic videos that I have done and Irish witchcraft videos. So some examples would be protection. So there is a stone and voice spell that I've done. Clearing, so we're using a native herb, dandelion, or a native plant, and Bridget's flame. So some of you will be familiar with Bridget. Again, you can practice Irish witchcraft without the gods. It doesn't have to be spiritual or religious in any way. I personally have relationships with Irish gods and goddesses, and I find that building those relationships and building that connection in a way that I am offering and of service to them first and foremost. Again, we're not coming to any entity, any being with entitlement. We're not calling them into a ritual so that they can solve our particular problem, whether it's love or health or anything, and they don't know us from Adam. That's not how we go about things with Irish gods and goddesses, with Irish ancestors. Certainly not with the Sidhe. I would recommend not working with the fairies. I do have a whole book on the fairy faith in Ireland if you want to, if you feel a need to, or you feel you need information. I do recommend that you read that book. You can also go to duchas.ie. Again, there are all sorts of free resources that are available on our blog, on our podcast, on this YouTube channel. Please, 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 if you have any intention or attraction to the Sidhe, the fairies, the good neighbours, the other crowd, it is definitely a part of our Irish witchcraft traditions, but a lot of it is protection from them and protecting the people in our communities from the other crowd. So please understand that is the basis of the Irish tradition. While a witch or a Banfassa can have their own relationship with the Sidhe, and they can become allies even in certain cases, that is a very needs must situation. So please understand that if that is part of the working that you want to do, whether gods, goddesses, ancestors, Sidhe, any kind of otherworld entities, please, sorry, itchy nose, I'm going to have a fight with the Sidhe at some point now. Blessings, blessings, blessings. The grounding of our practice in the everyday in the daily practices that we do, in the experiences that we're having, and where our mental clarity and our focus is. The grounding of that, tugam mo smuincha walia. You call your thought, like I call my thoughts home, is how that translates. So tugam mo smuincha walia is something that I would use as a mantra on a fairly regular basis to ground and center where I am, certainly before I practice any work. But again, there is a whole simple ritual that is in that playlist that I will put at the end. So please do click on there and have a look through those, just as good examples of how we take our traditions and put it in a contemporary format. My Irish is not perfect, but speaking your intention os Gaeilge is an automatic connection point. My Irish is very standard. I unfortunately, nobody in my home spoke Irish. I never was well off enough to go to a Gaeltacht region. I was not raised in a Gaeltacht region. I am not a fluent Gaelgor or native speaker. So everything I have had to learn, I've had to learn myself. And you can too, even if it's only a couple of focal, a few words. But something as simple as lighting a candle and speaking your intention os Gaeilge is very powerful, because again, you're connecting to that ancestry, you're connecting to the gods, guides, and guardians of Ireland in their native tongue. And that's very important. And it's important to decolonize our own mind and our own spirituality in that way as well. Something as simple as a nature walk every day, really, greeting trees, leaving offerings. Again, that Wisdom of Irish Trees class that I've just taught has a lot of very practical support in that way. And please just remember, small acts done often are really more powerful than big rituals, big fancy rituals or ceremonies that are done rarely, even, once a month. Better it be when the moon is full, we gather. Great, okay. Getting together in a group for a group working at a particular lunar cycle or a particular solar point can be very, very powerful. But that's not the heart of Irish witchcraft. Irish witchcraft is in the everyday. It's in your mind, it's in your heart, it's in your soul, it's in your feet that walk the ground beneath you. It is in how you literally relate to everything that is in this world, how you interact with the magic, how you can use natural forces, how you can use small, simple rituals to create change in accordance with your will. That's Irish witchcraft. So we're almost done. I know this is a long video, but some people are really interested in it. I want to make sure that certainly if this is the first video you've ever watched, or the first video from an Irish person, that it is comprehensive, that it has lots of practical support and suggestions. Again, a huge amount of free resources, more in-depth classes if you want to pay for them or if you're able to pay for them. And if not, please make use of all of our free resources that are available. I'm going to finish up here with a couple of warnings, little note on the ethics of everything that you're doing. So please don't take items from sacred sites. I can't belabor that point enough. We really operate in a leave no trace. So I don't take anything, but I also don't leave anything. We have a rag tree tradition here in Ireland that is hugely misunderstood and is completely damaging our trees on the island, particularly at sacred sites such as Tara, the Hill of Tara. Leave no trace, okay? If you absolutely must connect to a place, a strand of hair or some spit from your mouth will literally connect your DNA without doing any harm. But beware of the connection that you're making, because the connection works both ways. So leave no trace is very good for spiritual hygiene as well as anything else. Never use human remains or grave dirt. So very common on TikTok or Witch Talk is talking about grave dirt. Now, it is part of the Irish tradition to go to the graves of your own ancestors. And there's very powerful magic to be had, but that is high level magic. and is usually used for cursing, honestly, and particularly for generational curses. So it's not something that I am going to be teaching, and anybody ethical is not going to be teaching it on fucking TikTok or YouTube or Instagram or anything like that. So please beware of anybody who's telling you to go and take grave dirt from somebody's fucking grave. It is so disrespectful. Again, Irish witchcraft is very much about our ancestral connections, our ancestral reverence, as many native and tribal cultures are. And our relationship with those who have departed from this world is a very big part of where our magic flows and comes from, and how we make use of otherworld connections and magical and spiritual energy. So the idea of just going and taking human remains or grave dirt from somebody, some random grave, or the grave of somebody important, it's like going to the archaeological monument and taking a stone off. We just don't do that, okay? And I can't understand anybody who teaches it or anybody who recommends it. And it's more aesthetics, it's more play acting, it's more nonsense, absolute fucking nonsense. It is, again, that photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. Somebody heard something about Irish magic or Irish witchcraft uses grave dirt with no cultural context, no understanding, no experience in the matter, and have decided to go and teach it on their TikTok account or profile. So please be really careful about these ethics and about these misunderstandings that are so prevalent online currently. Please don't ever invent spirits. We actually have some entities here in Ireland which are supposedly Irish entities, which are completely manufactured, which, you know, we can trace back to the 90s, basically when Celtic paganism or Celtic shamanism was the hot thing, Celtic witchcraft, and they're literally just made up by people who were in some kind of cult of personality and wanted to, you know, make themselves look good, I suppose, or gain followers or whatever it was. And we don't do that. Okay. Again, we are very firmly rooted in the native culture, in the native source material. We are very methodical. We learn as much as we can before we move to experience and integration. That is, again, the three pillars of Irish pagan practice. And none of that involves inventing spirits or mashing up different cultures. We really stay in our own lane. And I highly recommend that you do the same. You may not be connected to Irish witchcraft. You may not feel an affinity for this. You can definitely take some of the ethics and the precepts and the ideas, and you can apply them to whatever your own native culture is. But I would very much look to your native culture or the culture of the land that you're on, with permission, of course. And again, decolonize your practice, decolonize your spirituality, decolonize your magic, because none of that is doing any good in the current situation globally. What we also don't do is we don't use ourselves as a magical battery. A lot of the danger of what's being taught as guided journeying, guided meditation, as spells or rituals, they really don't connect to source in the way of, again, relationships, built relationships where power can flow in an equal exchange. They don't pay attention to that, and it leads to burnout, it leads to possession, it leads to all sorts of hairy, scary nonsense that we don't want, we don't do. So be very aware of, again, that centering, that focusing, that cleansing, that protection. And again, there's going to be a playlist at the end of this video, which leads you directly to very simple practices, spells, rituals that you can do solo, and are very much taking care of all that, so you don't get burnt out and you don't get possessed and you don't use yourself as a battery. Okay? So the do's. Learn about Fear Flaha, the sovereign truth, and Gau Flaha, the sovereign's lies. It's something I teach about in my new book that's coming out on the Morrigan. So it's the first time an Irish person has written a book about the Morrigan. Wherever you're watching this, if you're watching this when it's published, it will be out in a few months. You can pre-order now. Again, I'll put a link below to where you can access that book. It's published by Llewellyn. And it's the Morrigan from an Irish perspective, which is the first time that that has been done. So again, a lot of what's been missing in the cultural context, in the lived experience, when other people are teaching about the Morrigan, is very much a part of how I teach about the Morrigan. So you can find out more information on the Morrigan as one of the most powerful Irish goddesses if you do want to develop a relationship with a very powerful ally. But she is quite demanding as well. She does demand a very high level of work from people who are dedicated to her. So take all of that under advisement. But Fair Flaha, Gau Flaha, the sovereign's truth and the sovereign's lies, again, you really only find it in academic works. We do have a teacher at the Irish Pagan School called Dr. Gillian Kenny. There is a playlist on this channel of interviews that I have done with Dr. Kenny. She teaches classes such as the Sovereignty Goddess in Ireland, and a lot about Gaelic Ireland here at the Irish Pagan School. So I do recommend that you either watch the free videos or take some of Gillian's classes for that real grounding in the academic source material so that you can make very good choices and decisions about what you know or what you want to know. And when we're learning about Fair Flaha, one of the applications or the integrations of it is that your truth has power, but also responsibility. So you as sovereign, you need to be in a position of truth, speaking truth, truth within your relationships, truth within your own power, all of that. And this is what leads to a healthy practitioner. And the opposite of that then is Gau Flaha, the sovereign's lie. And when you have that Gau Flaha in your relationships with yourself, with other people, with your land, with your community, all of this works on a macrocosm and a microcosm as well. So what we do as well is we always ask for consent. Consent is key. We, again, are in a relationship with the land, with the spirits, with the ancestors, with the gods, with the goddesses. And all of that requires building in a right relationship. And consent is very much a part of that, including the trees, including the plants that we work with, including the stones, including the sacred sites. We are very, very respectful and very ethical when we are working with any of those as power sources, as allies, as connections that we want to build relationship with. And what we do is we be patient, because this is a long path. This is a lifetime's work. You can absolutely pick up the charms and the spells and the rituals, and they will help you in your daily life. But if you really want to commit to Irish witchcraft, again, there's no real initiation as such. It is just about doing the work. It is fulfilling that role and function within your own community. So that's what makes an Irish witch. That's what makes a Banfassa. And they're often titles that are given by people who have benefited from you doing that work, from that role, that function. They're not grandiose titles that we're going to take on because they sound good when we visit the local pagan moot or the local pagan conference or festival, and we declaim ourselves Irish witches, right? Or Bandri or Banfassa. I mean, I would be very hesitant to call myself a Banfassa because it literally means wise woman. And the titles in Irish tradition, in Irish culture, our titles are only job descriptions, really. So we have to be very, very careful about that we're not, again, feeling entitled to these titles, right? We earn them because of the work that we do. And it is a long road. It's a long road, and it is hard, right? So what I would suggest is you check out the links below, again, in the description. All of the classes that I mentioned will, well, hopefully all of the classes, but if there's one that I mentioned that I have forgotten to put into the description by the time I finish this video, what I would suggest is you go to irishpaganschool.com and you will find the list under all courses. You will find the list of all the available courses currently. So just choose one. They're not very expensive. Just choose one that suits you, invest in it. One a month, one a week, whatever you can afford. There is also a Quarter membership program where you have access to every class that myself and John have taught at the Irish Pagan School as part of a subscription, a membership. It's like the Netflix for the Irish Pagan School. And there's all sorts of resources and recommendations. When you join the mailing list, you will also have access to a little quiz that will kind of lead you in the right direction for where you're at right now. So I highly recommend that you make use of our resources, free or paid if you can afford it. If not, please start learning from the free resources. Again, links to everything below. And I suppose I just want to finish with start small, start where you are, stay curious, stay respectful, work on your decolonization. If you feel entitled to something, really sit with that and check yourself. Listen more than you speak. Do not presume to teach this if you are not Irish, if you have not been practicing for a significant amount of time, if you have not earned those titles by doing the jobs, right? Please don't teach this if you haven't earned the right to. And the land, the ancestors, the gods, guides, and guardians of Ireland will absolutely meet you halfway when you approach in these respectful ways. But you need to show up. You need to show up consistently. Again, this is the everyday magic. This is not some big, grand bells and whistles ceremony where you get a flashbang initiation and you're in, right? This is about you building relationship. So hopefully that's been helpful to you. Check out the links in the description and I will see you in the next video. And here, wherever, is your playlist for everything that we've been talking about with regard to the spells and rituals that are very practical, very functional. And I hope that they are of use to you. So, slán.